starts loading up here, I'll introduce Kevin Ziemba. Kevin is the East Regional Manager for STgenetics, where he and his team provide genetic support and resources to dairy producers. Born and raised on a dairy, Kevin has spent his entire life in genetics. Kevin graduated from Cornell University, where he earned a master's degree in quantitative genetics. After college, Kevin managed advanced genetics for 3 years and then held a management role in select sires for 17 years, providing genetic and reproduction solutions to dairy producers. During this time, he also managed a 3,000 cow dairy in Woodcrest, New York. Kevin is a very active Cornell alumna, returning to Cornell to guest lecture the dairy genetics class each year and coach the Cornell dairy judging team. He's also active in the Northeast Dairy Challenge, where he mentors young dairy professionals as a judge. Kevin resides in Durhamville, New York with his wife Barb and son Mason. Barb is a genetic services specialist for STgenetics as well, and Mason is an avid dairy enthusiast, having his own line of show cattle and staying active in dairy judging. We are very thankful to have Kevin here to present to us this morning, and I will go ahead and let you take over.
All right, well, thank you very much, Gail, and thank you to everyone involved with this unique opportunity to share as much information as we can about the dairy industry and some of the things that we can do to try to help our fellow dairy farmers and our support specialists out there to provide as many resources to the industry as we possibly can. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about managing heifer inventories and the importance of it. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to tie into some of the things that Albert talked about. And I think it'll show a little bit or illustrate some opportunities in regards to understanding, especially today in our current dairy economy in the U.S., especially as to where managing heifers can really have, I don't know if the word positive impact is the right word, but at least some mitigation of some loss is maybe a better statement. In the dairy industry, we know change is inevitable, and we're definitely going through a period of time right now, currently, that is huge in regards to the change model. And, it's going to continue to change, and we're seeing a lot of our dairies now starting to even have to consider things that 6 months ago were not on their radar in regards to reducing production. And even prior to some of these current restructuring of the production model, a lot of dairies have really realized that they need to change some of their goals in regards to overproducing. And our larger dairies have grown so much, and they're concentrated groups of cows. And how do we actually maximize the efficiencies associated with the number of cows and heifers that we actually have? Dairies over a period of time, we're in a huge growth mode, and we grew heifer numbers to kind of, flow along with the dairy, not knowing that in actuality what we were doing was increasing our herd numbers more than we probably even knew that we were capable of doing. Over the last decade, there's been huge improvements in reproductive management that have attributed to the growth in our national heifer population and our cow population. When I was at Cornell and working with reproductive management tools, we would often go to dairies and talk to them about their preg rate, and preg rates being in the upper teens and low 20s being considered extremely acceptable and good. And today, preg rates on dairies well in excess of the upper 20s and low to mid 30s in milking cows, and upper 40s to near 50 in the heifer population. And when you think about that all attributes to an increased number of heifers that we're seeing on our farms. If our herds are more efficient in making pregnancies, we're going to make more heifers. And that has just been the model that slowly occurred. And then you think about the genetic element to this. It's a huge opportunity that we've had to improve genetics. And, during a period of the 90s, actually the U.S. Holstein population actually declined even into the 2000s on daughter pregnancy rate. Yet when genomics became more available and readily part of the program and measured, we now see dairies actually put more emphasis on fertility in their genetic models, but also the Holstein herd as a whole has improved genetically from a reproductive performance standpoint. So when you couple that together with the improvement in management, we've actually been much more efficient at creating extra heifers. Sex semen, be honest, it's a statement that we can say that there's a level of blame that can be placed to the increased use of sex semen. But in actuality, I'm going to say that it's more that we didn't understand how to use it properly. And now that we've actually gotten to an acceptance level with sex semen and where it fits in, there's actually a renewed focus on the fact that our Holstein bull calves, our Jersey bull calves are worth nothing, if not a minus cost when they're born. So utilizing sex semen to garner the appropriate number of replacements and then using beef semen to kind of work in concert with the sex semen allows for us to get the right number of heifers, that level of genetic improvement, and then capture some value, hopefully, on that black-hided crossbred Angus or beef breed calf. This has all led to a little bit of an overpopulation of heifers, and I think our dairies out there now are really focused on the standpoint of trying to reduce that impact, especially today. Even in the last, I'd say, 3 weeks, I've spent a lot of time working with individual dairies on their future plans, thinking about how they're going to use genetics in a way that's going to be constructive for them over the next 6 months, year to 5 years. And I think we're seeing those herds really realize that they've got to reduce those heifer populations. So that cost structure, we're going to review a little bit the cost structure of excess heifers. We all know that it costs a lot, but sometimes we don't see it in the everyday in and out of cash flow on the dairy. So when we actually take it out and we can see that it has a huge impact, we need to focus more on reducing that cost of excess heifers. And then there's more growing constraints on growth, herd welfare, product quality, and as we're working today on product quantity. So all of those things together makes it ever more apparent that managing the right number of heifers is extremely, extremely important if we're going to stay viable and have that model towards greater efficiency and sustainability in the industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about the why of heifer inventory management. And when we really get into some of the nuts and bolts, we need to really understand that one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is reduce the variable and fixed costs of raising unwanted heifers. And we need to understand, sometimes on dairies, we struggle a little bit understanding that it's like the chicken before the egg standpoint. And if our cull rates are high, we often don't understand that the reason they're high is that the heifer population is what is pushing our cull rates to be high. And Albert had some really great slides illustrating where cull rates need to be and some efficiencies of economics that are associated with those different cull rates. And a lot of times, unfortunately, our herds aren't thinking about that as strongly as maybe I would hope that they would do, because we have the heifers there. And so we have this heifer population, and let's say you're at a rate of 1,000 cows and you have 1,000 heifers, that's a 100% heifer to cow ratio. And so we're going to have somewhere between 400 and 500 heifers that are going to calve within the next year, pushing our lactating herd to cull at a higher rate. So which of those elements is leading the charge? Is it that our cull rate is forcing us to have extra heifers, or is it the extra heifers are actually forcing us to have higher cull rates? And I think a lot of herds now are realizing that I can actually reduce my cull rate by having less total heifers. I have a herd that I work with closely that has one of those cull rates in the 20 to 25% range, and milks well over 1,000 cows. And the efficiencies that they've garnered over the last 3 years in having a model like that has not only made them more cost effective in heifer raising, but also, as Albert again alluded to, made them a more mature herd. As they reduce those cull rates, now they have a herd that has probably 25 to 30% of their herd is lactation 4 and greater. And so there's a lot of efficiencies and peak production and pounds of solids that can be generated by that. So making sure that we manage those right number of replacements from a total business model is extremely important. The genetic progress element is an area of huge opportunity in regards to managing the right number of heifers. We've seen through the industry different pathways for genetic progress. On the sire of sire side, if you think about that, that's all kind of within the AI industry. It's the mating sires that are used in the AI industry to sire the next generation of bulls. So those decisions are made by that side of the industry. The dams of sires, those are the female population that are the elite end of whether it's net merit or TPI or whatever genetic indice we're using. Those females are isolated, and we're making genetic progress in the AI industry by selecting those mothers of the next generation of genetics that are used. The sires of dam side, that's what you choose every day on the farm as far as the bulls that are used. The genetic progress from the sires that you use on your farm lead to your next generation of genetic progress. And as an industry, we've really focused on those 3 pathways for years. And it's just in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years at the most, and maybe just the last 2 to 3, that we've been able to focus on the dams of dams. And when I say dams of dams, now we have the ability to decide which females in your herd are worthy of being mothers to the next generation of replacements. And when you think about that, that's a powerful tool. It's hugely powerful because now you can decide, well, this group of animals based on genetics and actual performance, I would like replacements out of them. And then the rest of the herd can actually carry beef calves. And not saying they're going to be culled or leave the herd, but they can make a calf that has maybe more value than a Holstein bull and actually stay in the herd and be productive, yet focusing on the female population that can create replacements for the future. So this allows for genetic progress of that Holstein population within herd. There's a compounding effect of genomic testing to improve decision-making and accuracy. As our herds really focus on that genetic progress element and they realize and see that genetics actually have an impact on their herd, they then realize that the accuracy of those decisions makes it even more economically valuable to decide which females are going to be chosen to make replacements. So accuracy is really important. And ultimately, within our model, the real value is pounds of solids output per cow per day. And when we think about that, even in today's dairy model, with reduced milk prices, production restraints, if we have the ability, I've worked with a lot of dairies here in the recent days where, we're being told this is our base for production that we have. But if we can maximize the components within that base, we're actually gaining a small amount of leverage within that base. So the genetic side of managing those solids per cow per day, depending on where you are within the US, can be a huge opportunity. And the genetic element of heifer inventory management allows you to capture that over time and improving the fertility of the female population through DPR. Another why in regards to heifer inventory management is that beef cross-calf opportunity. And we see more and more dairies shifting towards a beef cross associated with their bottom end Holsteins or Jerseys for that matter, that allows them to capture some value in the short term, especially with the wet calf market. We'll see pretty strongly $100 differential between the Holstein bull calf and a beef cross calf. Within that, there's some variation on male versus female. And in this new era where we're having to reduce production and manage production more efficiently, we're seeing dairies actually shift some economic opportunities to raise some of these beef cross calves on some of the excess production and try to capture some long-term value by raising these cross calves to 400 to 500 pounds. And all of this together hopefully allows for greater dairy population sustainability. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the how of heifer inventory management. And when we talk about the how, all of the different metrics that go into deciding how many heifers we need on an annual basis is kind of critical. And we have to use the within herd metrics. And not only the existing within herd metrics, but a discussion about what is the future of this. And just like everybody knows, if we actually reduce the cull rate, we actually need less heifers. So if the cull rate is at 31% right now, we're setting a bar for the current number of heifers needed. But say in 6 months to a year or a year and a half, that cull rate drifts downward, we're actually going to need to adjust these needs for heifers one more time. Because I have seen very clearly dairies starting with like a 35 to 40% cull rate. And then within a year and a half, they actually have cull rates below 30, and they're now still creating excess heifers. So this is an example herd of 1,000 cows roughly with a 31% cull rate. The number of heifers we're taking into contributing factors of sold and died or cull rate on heifers, average age at first calving, and their existing non-completion rate. And we're showing that their needs are 366 heifer calves to be born annually, or 30 a month, and this is with no growth rate. If there was a growth rate put in, we'd have that in. We know we're not doing that today. And then there's replacements needed to enter the herd based on that cull rate, or non-completion rate, I should say, of 319. So this herd needs about 30 heifer calves a month to maintain herd size with that level of cull rate and non-completion rate. So now we're going to actually start putting some modeling together with this dairy, and this is this dairy's actual numbers. So we're looking at all of the things that go into it, their DOAs, the percent of heifers that are generated from sex semen, percent of heifers that are generated from conventional. And this is looking at what this herd is doing currently, using a little bit of a balance of a small amount of sex semen and mostly conventional dairy semen, and a small amount of beef semen. And we can see that this dairy is, we've calculated that they need 30 heifers a month, which is 366 heifers, but they're actually in excess. And they're in excess of 180 heifers here for a year. And that's pretty significant. And we look at it on a monthly basis, though, it almost seems like it's not a big deal. 8, 14, down in 4, we have a couple months well above 20. So from the outside perspective, when we're managing these calves in this dairy on a day in and day out basis, it's easy to say, well, it's doesn't have a huge impact to have this extra amount of heifers. But when we do the math on that, 180 extra heifers annually, we're actually on the totality of raising those heifers using a variable heifer raising cost, which is really the feed cost and labor. We're actually not going to count in depreciation, buildings, fixed costs that are associated. Like if we decrease raising heifers by 15 to 20 heifers a month, we're actually not going to, let's say it costs $1,800 to $2,000 to raise a heifer to calving. Not all of that cost or opportunity cost we're going to gain back by not raising those heifers. We're actually, because we're not going to sell a skid steer, we're not going to let some employees go, we're not going to close down a barn. So we're reducing heifer raising costs in more of a variable measure of feeding some labor. And so even in that moderate or modest measurement, to raise those total heifers in all the way to calving is about $205,000. And if we used an average age of first calving of 23 months, that's about $8,900 a month or $107,000 a year in just raising those 180 extra heifer calves. So when we think about that on our dairies, the impact of raising extra heifers when we don't necessarily need them is huge. So then it comes into like, how do I implement this? How do I take that type of strategy and implement that? And a lot of dairies and any of the AI companies can work with producers to put some modeling together. And these models can be very fluid on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, a yearly basis, depending on calvings, et cetera. But this is giving an example of one herd. So in the heifers at the top left corner, we'll see that this is a herd that on the heifers pathway, they're going to use the first two services of sex semen and then some conventional semen. And then in their lactation 1 cows, the first service is going to be sexed, a second service of conventional, then beef. And then if you think about it, all of the mature cows are getting beef. And everybody's going to say, those cows that are lactation 2 and greater, they're really good cows. I don't want them bred to beef. I want them bred to sex. We can create some models that vary depending on the herd's needs. But at the same time, if you do this right and you do this consistently, those really, really good cows in lactation 2 and lactation 3, if we did this right, we identified them as heifers and lactation 1. And we should have captured at least 1, if not 2 heifer calves from them already before they get to that lactation 2. So in this scenario, this herd needed 30 heifers a month. We went to more of a sexed and beef approach. And now we're creating a scenario where they're going to be making about 34 heifers a month, 7 Holstein bull calves, and then 47 beef calves a month. So we're over creating on our heifers by about 4, which is a month, or 45 total, which is a lot better than that 180. And then we can set up some parameters we're using in these pathways, the existing conception rates that are seen within that farm for sex semen. We're using the conventional conception rates that they're seeing in beef, et cetera. So we can adjust these based on whatever pathway or whatever information or data that farm has on their herd management software. So heifer inventory management and coupling it with sex semen can be extremely beneficial, because we're going to use sex semen on the top animals and try to maximize getting heifers out of our best animals to improve that genetic progress side. And then we can actually use beef on the rest. And that way we're minimizing the impact of unwanted heifers, but also unwanted or unnecessarily unnecessary Holstein bull calves. So in heifers, sex semen works exceptionally well. 70-90% of the sex semen used on a dairy will be used in the heifer population if we're doing it right, and we're identifying both on the generation interval aspect of genetic progress, but also that our heifers should be the future of the herd and have the best genetics, so we want to capture that. We're going to achieve conception rates anywhere between 50 and say 70%. AI protocols can be set up. Sometimes we'll use seeders, loot shots, etc. Timing of insemination is really important. Sex semen likes delayed timing of insemination, probably targeting for 16 to 18 hours after the onset of standing heat. The value of conception has to be weighed, and it's very valuable. The value of purity, some sex semen products vary anywhere between say 85% heifer calf ratio all the way up to say 92, 93, 94% heifers. So putting all of those into a weighted value so that you're making sure that you're maximizing getting the most heifer calves out of that type of scenario. Heifers that do not conceive to a well-run repro program sometimes even become cull candidates after 3 to 4 services. It depends on the herd and the goal. It's just a statement to state out there that if they can't get pregnant, why do they need to be there? So creating a protocol using sex semen, and we need to still focus on the reduction of the range around the age at first calving, which is still paramount to whether the financial viability of a heifer raising and growth program. So this is an example of a dairy in their heifers, and that has a protocol for 4 services of sex semen and their heifer population. And we can see our top dairy comp graph showing that first inseminations occur at about 400 days, second services at around 420, and our third services are occurring by 450 days. And the bottom graph is actually the date, not of inseminations, but pregnancies. So a majority of this herd's goals are being met by 2 services. So our range of days to pregnancy and our range of future age at first calving is really tight. So this herd is really maximized some conception rates and are running in their 59% conception overall, and they're knocking off a lot of pregnancies as early as possible. Same thing here can be stated in cows. I mean, I've had a lot of success, and a lot of dairies out there are having a lot of success with sex semen in the lactating herd, especially with the lactation 1 cows. And if we do this whole thing right, we really only need to use a small amount of sex semen in the lactating herd. About 10 to 30% of our sex semen usage can be just used on cows if we're doing a good job with our heifer program. And we can see conception rates anywhere from 35 to 55%, and even a little higher in some recent work that I've been doing on conception rate and lactation 1s, especially on first and second services. AI protocols, pre-sync, OV-sync, double OV-sync. I will tell you that sex semen in both of those scenarios works really well, especially if we work with our timing to get it in the 16 to 18 hour window after the GnRH shot. That can have a huge advantage in conception. And again, the value of purity. Cows most likely are only needed for first service candidates, as I showed in that one example model, to make the appropriate number of heifer calves. And this is where dairies really kind of, I don't want to say they struggle, but the need to use sex semen isn't as great as people think. When we actually break down the herd, figure out the heifers that are needed, we can actually capture a majority, if not all, of our replacements from our heifers and our best lactation 1 cows. Only need to use the top 25% for sex semen on a net merit or TPI basis, and create a protocol that still continues to reduce the range around days open. And this is just another example. This is actually a dairy that I've worked with quite a bit that milks 2,700 cows. They do a pre-sync, off-sync, and they actually, and it's just to illustrate that sex semen in cows can work really well. They had to sell a large portion of their heifer or virgin heifer population out of a necessity for the quality of the care that those heifers were receiving at a custom grower. And we have actually had to start using sex semen heavily in their lactating cows to create future replacements. And so the top 60% of lactation 1 cows were bred to sex semen to try to compensate for pregnant heifer sales. No conventional semen was used. It was only sexed in beef. And the herd actually maintained a 28% preg rate throughout that, and a 41% conception on all services. So it was a very efficient, and today this herd has actually gone past this challenge, I guess you would say, of needing to use sex semen this heavily. And now they have a heifer population of their own. They've graduated, I guess you would say, and are down to using the top 35% of their lactation 1 cows for sex semen candidates, and the preg rate's now running around 33%. So it really can work well in cows. The whole part of this is to actually illustrate that there's a genetic element to this need for managing the appropriate number of heifer calves. If the top 25 to 50% of herd will be used in that mother of mother or mother of replacement pathway to make those replacements, sex semen will be used on the best portion of the population. Herds will see a 46% increase in conception because you're using it on the best females. You're using it on the high DPR females if you're using a net merit model. Those top animals create future genetics and performance gain. The bottom animals are creating terminal crosses, and we talked about those beef calves having an extra value to the dairy for the future beyond just the genetic progress or managing for reduced heifers and genomic testing improvements. So this comes into the statement of, do we believe in genetic progress on herds? And this is an area I think that we've seen a huge amount of increase in the acceptance of genetics on our dairies. And this is showing a genetic audit of a dairy. So the lactation 1 animals, everything on this dairy is genomic tested. The top 25%, this is prior to the base change here in April, so I apologize for that. The average net merit is 658. The top animal was 891 to 586. So that top 25% is represented at on the top. The count, there was 193 of these. Of those 193, 18 were sold, 8 died, and that represented roughly a 13.5% cull rate. 88 of those animals were pregnant, and that was resulted in 112 days to pregnancy on the animals that were pregnant. The bottom 25%, in contrast, averaged 290 net merit, 193 of them, 69 were sold, 10 died with a 41% cull rate. And the 95 of that group randomly that were pregnant at that point in time when we pulled this, they took them 121 days to pregnancy. So when we think about genetics, the whole point of this is to capture more of these top cows and put beef in these bottom cows. So if we use heifer inventory management strategies the right way, we not only are going to make the right number of heifers for replacements, but we're going to make them from the best animals in the herd that have viable on-farm reasons for why they stayed in the herd versus the bottom group of cows that we want to use beef semen in, that obviously for whatever reason genetically and the matching of their genetics with management environment did not stay in that herd. And that goes into our productive life measurements for our sold events, livability, which is our died events, and our daughter pregnancy rate, which is a measurement of our days open. And when we think about net merit, those are three health indices that are strongly weighted within that net merit index. So our goal through this type of a program is to actually try to capture as much of that dams of dams pathway. So we're going to try to capture the top 25% of our females, use sex semen on this group shaded in pink, and then we're going to use beef on the bottom. And that's going to allow us to manage the right number of heifers. We're going to mate these all to the best bulls in the industry. And when we go back and we mate this group here to elite bulls, this is the future population genetic average that's created. So it's like creating an own bell-shaped curve of future genetic progress available for that dairy. And that's really important. As we manage heifers, as we try to create beef cross calves, we also have to keep in mind that that genetic progress element is huge. And when we look at this over a timeline perspective, our goal is actually, if we were to take this dairy and shift them to more sexed and beef, and using genetic progress as part of the heifer inventory management strategy, they're actually going to deviate their genetic progress over that baseline of where they would be without it. And that creates more economic value through the net merit modeling. And also it allows for those animals, as we've shown and proven from their internal data, that those animals actually do stay in the herd longer and are more productive. And as Albert even showed in some of his productive life modeling of production, we actually now can then take that production and think about how it applies to that productive life, which is extremely important for the future. So just as a summary, so that we can get into some questions, summary of these concepts: know your heifer inventory needs. And there's tools and calculators out there that'll allow us to capture that and know those needs. And we need to reduce unneeded heifers, even more so today in our current dairy economy and climate. Those are things that we need to make real on our dairies to reduce those unneeded and costly heifers. Select the best animals to make replacement from. Sex semen drives consistency of heifer prediction because we don't use conventional semen where it's 50-50 or 49-51, whatever. Use the best reproductive practices to continue to achieve best reproductive herd metrics so that the herd stays fresh. And allow that genetic progress to move the herd forward. These tools, when we put them in together, allow for a dairy to move from a current level of, like, I'm productive and I can maintain profitability, but especially today, if we can remove some of these excesses to try to reduce some extra cost, and we can also at the same time push genetics towards the future, that actually can capture a lot of value and allow change to occur. I've talked to a lot of really smart dairymen in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And, it's really easy for dairymen we're very optimistic and we know how to persevere. And it's really interesting because a lot of the really successful ones will say, these are the cards we're being dealt. This is the situation and the modeling that we have to work with. And now it's my job to be profitable and efficient within that set of guidelines. And if I change and I adapt, I'm going to succeed. So with that, I guess that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Once again, if you have any questions for our speaker, you can feel free to leave them in the chat window over on YouTube, and I'll read them off. So I guess to get started, a lot of the strategies you've talked about, obviously there's going to be a 2-year delay before those heifers are becoming cows down the road. So if we're looking at some of these short-term challenges that we're seeing as an industry, can you talk about some strategies for how to handle that? And can I also, sorry, this is maybe going to be a long question. If you have a farm that has found itself with an excess of heifer inventory, what strategies is that farm going to be using to mitigate some of those excess heifers?
So answering the second part first, I mean, I think every dairy is going to look at their own situation uniquely different. But I think a lot of dairies are now putting some emphasis on genomic testing those calves at birth and deciding, is there an opportunity to create a layer of culling? Some herds have even gone with the concept, I'm not going, if I'm going to, after 60 days at weaning, I have a percentage of, let's call them the bottom performance calves that I'm going to cull or remove from the herd. I can then use genomic testing at, say, 9 months to a year, and then I can decide what to do with those heifers, whether they should be sold as replacements, whether they should be culled, or whether what type of breeding strategy to use with them. But I think a lot of herds are trying to figure out where to start, and that's usually a challenge, is figuring out where to start. And it really does start, like you said, it's a 2-year process, but you have to start with the breeding program and then develop a strategy to deal with the existing heifer calves that you have and how to mitigate the cost structure associated with taking them too far. Mm-hmm. And genomic testing them is definitely one aspect that can really, really help. And what was the first question then, maybe, if I didn't answer that?
So are there, I guess you kind of already addressed it, but short-term strategies, when we have a situation like we're in today where it's a little bit more of an emergency inventory management, and heifers are obviously a cost on the farm, although that are going to pay themselves off down the road, but not immediately.
Yeah, I've had a couple of really good conversations about that lately, and I had one herd that actually I thought they were kind of going to jump the gun. They were going to go to a model where they were going to basically try to reduce breeding costs by going almost all beef and only using sex semen even on just the top half of the heifers. And their goal was to, in 9 months to a year, they were going to be reducing heifer raising costs. And at the short term, they would be reducing current semen costs, I guess is the way to put it. That does make me a little bit nervous, because, you're now having to think about buying replacements, which is probably easy to do. But at the same time, you're taking the control out of your own hands. Mm-hmm. So I think weighing all of those options is probably really important, and maybe even putting more emphasis on there is some tools out there to genomic test that may not be as expensive as a full genomic test that can be used for culling strategies as well.
All right. So we have a question from the audience, kind of spinning off that idea. How many extra heifers, what sort of buffer should you have, extra heifers that you'd want to produce to have heifers for a genomic cull? Or is it better not to get into that situation in the first place?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's better, for me, it's better not to get into that situation in the first place. I would be more inclined to create that buffer of, let's say it's, I would call it more the 1 to 2% per month for that 60-day cull rate based on poor performance. Whatever it is, whether it's average daily gains or number of treatments, having a little bit of buffer for that group is fine. But to create genomic cull or genetic culls, I wouldn't consider that as a strategy that would be economically viable.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a little bit of a different angle here. How do you go about selecting genetics on the beef side? Do you just use the cheapest semen? Is there a breed that works well? I know you mentioned Angus at one point in the talk, but maybe there are others that might fit well on a dairy operation.
Yeah, that's actually, it's hard to talk about the genetics of beef today because we want to try to reduce some costs associated with our breeding programs, but at the same time looking at futuristically, because we're going to get over this current hump where we're at, whether it's 6 months from now, 3 months from now, or 2 years from now, we're eventually going to move on. And we have to still, as dairy farms, plan for the future. Even though it's hard, we really, really have to. And with that said, the genetics associated with beef cross, especially on Holstein or Jersey, is incredibly important. We're learning from our processors and our feedlots that consistency and uniformity is key with that beef cross calf. The size and everything to do with muscling and marbling is incredibly important. So traits, a lot of dairies want to look just solely at fertility, but actually the relationship between calving ease and birth weight is extremely important. And in beef, the higher the number for calving ease is better. But in actuality, when we select for extremely high calving ease, we actually typically get low birth weight. And if you're a dairy that's focusing on cross calves to sell at birth or wet calves, you definitely don't want small calves. We need not, the Angus cross with Holstein is ideal for a lot of different reasons in regards to marbling and size and structure. The Sim Angus also crosses exceptionally well with that Holstein as well for a total of ribeye and marbling. And so looking at all of those traits together, and we're going to continue to learn more about that. And there's some feed efficiency associated with beef cross calves as well that we're tapping into as well. So as the industry moves and stays in this beef cross calf model, we're going to continue to learn more information about what traits really matter. And knowing now that traits like calving ease, birth weight, yearling weight, we don't want tall because Holstein already is bringing in tall or a lot of size. So looking at all of those traits in concert with $B and marbling and ribeye are extremely important.
Mm-hmm. So I guess one more question to kind of wrap us up. And this is actually a follow-up, maybe a point of clarification about genomic culling. So what is the value of genomic testing? And what strategies, which animals are you going to be genomically testing? At what stage of life is that going to be happening? What strategy are you using for genomics, or are you recommending for genomics?
Yeah, so as far as the valuation of genomic testing, I can't overemphasize how important I really feel it is. When we're on dairies, you have three areas where genomic testing can really add value to the farm. One is misidentification rates. All of our misidentification rates can range anywhere between 15 and 15% all the way up to 40 or 50%. And the average is probably greater than 25% across the dairies that we do genomic testing for. So you want to reduce that mis-ID. We also have a lot of haplotypes or recessives, And if we have the ability to genomic test, we're going to be able to breed more efficiently, knowing which haplotypes or recessives to avoid in our female population. And thirdly, there's amount of genetic shift. So if an animal has a parent average of, say, 400 net merit, she could be anywhere from, say, 200 to 600. And we want to make sure that we improve all that. All of those things said, our parent average basis of information is about 45% to 50% accurate. By genomic testing, we move north of 70%. And that really is the true reason why genomic testing can really add value to a dairy, because every one of those decisions that we talked about of when to use sex semen and when to use beef and when to cull it's no different than if you're putting seed or fertilizer in the ground. You're going to say that I want that accurate. I want the best of the best, and I want it accurate. So why wouldn't we genomic test? And as far as when we should genomic test, the younger the better, because we want, it's costing us anywhere from $3 to $7 a day to raise those calves to weaning. And if we can try to genomic test those young calves, if we're going to create genetic culls, the earlier we can do that, the better.
All right, thank you.